All right, folks. Once again, this is The Truth is Still Straight. And as you can see, it's the four horse men and women. It's your host, Jonathan St. James, along with Dawn, Jim, and Donnie. Hey, folks.
So,
Hey, how you doing?
Hello,
Hey,
hello.
Oh, you didn't do that like you usually do it, Donnie.
I'm sorry, man. I'll work on it. I'll get there. I'll workshop it, you see.
Okay, maybe we'll do some like dress rehearsal so you can get your hello, hello.
Of course, of course.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about it before we get into our conversation today. I saw Green Book for the first time yesterday, and I thought that was pretty interesting. You know, the first time I heard of the movie, wasn't really interested in it because it's a little beyond my scope of what I like watching in terms of movies. But I actually was on Facebook, and then I saw like somebody had like a little snippet of the video, and so I was like, what is this? And then someone said, oh, that's Green Book. So I went to watch it, and I was like, it was a pretty amazing movie, the Green Book. I don't know if any of you have seen that movie, but it's pretty incredible. It's based on a true story about this guy named Don Silver or something like that. I can't even remember what his last name. Shirley, I think his name was Don Shirley, and he was I guess African American. I didn't catch quite where he was from, but he was black, and he was a classically trained musician that basically decided that he could. So he decided that he wanted to travel in the South, and of course this is before civil rights, so you know how that was. And this guy that the record company that he was recording with hired this Italian American guy named Tony. Was it Tony Villalongo or something like that? And it was just an interesting dynamic how basically the guy they hired to drive was didn't like black people in the beginning. So that was an interesting dynamic to the movie where he didn't really like black people. They showed a scene, and I don't know how real I made that may have just been an illustration to show that he didn't like black people, but there was some two black repairmen in his home, and he saw that his wife had gave them something to drink, and so she put the glasses in the sink, and he saw that, and he picked the glasses up and threw it in the trash. So then the wife saw, she looked in the trash and saw the glasses, and she put it back. But the basis of the movie was this musician traveling around the country in the South because that's where his tour was, and just having a hard time, the whites only establishments and blacks only. And the interesting thing was he was playing at some of these establishments where he couldn't even sit at a table and eat or use the bathroom. So that was interesting, that the interesting dynamic. So I'm not sure if any of you even heard of the movie or saw it, but it was excellent. So, if you have nothing to do, Donnie, it's on the Plex. Not that you're going to go and watch it. It's very, Oscar type of movie, if you know what I mean. It's not like The Expendables or anything like that. It's
I don't watch the Expendables either.
No, but I meant in terms of the quality of movie. I didn't say you won't watch it. I'm
Sure.
just saying comparing it to, it's like a very, a movie that you think would be nominated for the Oscar. You could say this is that kind of movie.
Mhm.
But it's very emotional, to be honest. Anytime I see movies, historical movies about racism and stuff like that, and just to imagine the stuff that people went through back then and just had to endure it and go through it and soldier on, even though it was totally unfair to them. I mean, they, think about it. Black people in this country never, for the most part, I don't want to say always, but for the most part, Black people in America didn't ask to be here. They would brought here against their will. I mean, of course, you have some classes of Black people that weren't from slave trade, but that was very few, a very small amount of people. But the average person here, even when they came here black and they were free, it still wasn't as easy, as being any kind of white, because when you're white, you can, even though you may be from a hated class like Italians were and Irish, you could, if you don't travel with an accent, you can hide your ethnicity. A lot of Jews did that during the Hitler times. They would change their names so that people wouldn't know that they were Jewish, and sort of came over here for whatever reason. I know some people did it because it was difficult for people to pronounce, so they changed their names to more identifiable names. But you can do that, and people don't know where you're from. But, when you're black, it's like, okay, where are black people from? Usually, they're pretty much all black people are from Africa, whether it's directly from or, through way of the Caribbean or other countries and stuff like that. So, it was hard to, I can't lie. I get very emotional when I see movies like that because, my father, he's, from Tennessee. And he's definitely older than civil rights. So you think about that. And I just think about my own self, that I was born less than 10 years than the civil rights movement, when the Civil Rights Act was signed into the country. And, not that I experienced the racism that my father did, but I think about the racism that, just people moving past that era that we received, where it's like, don't go down that block. Don't go down that block. So, it's just interesting, the dynamics. Some of it is emotional because you think about it. I've been in situations where it's like you went down the wrong street and people were chasing you, like you were running for your life because you were going to get beat the hell out of. And I was a kid. I wasn't like an adult where I could fight back. I was 10, 11, 12, and you walk down the wrong block because you didn't know who lived there. And they're like, get off this block. And next thing you know, it's a mob chasing after you and you're running for your life. And that wasn't easy because I got tired fast. I could run fast, but I also got tired fast. So, I recommend. I recommend people watch the movie. I mean, like I said, it's based on a true story. It made me think about Sammy Davis Jr. because some of the issues that Sammy Davis Jr. experienced is similar to what did I say? Don Shirley, I think his name was. That they experienced similar things, but the only difference was that Frank Sinatra, actually, who was friends with Sammy Davis Jr., started actually intervening and rejecting this mistreatment of Sammy Davis Jr. when they would perform. Sammy Davis Jr., they would treat him the same way, and Frank Sinatra wasn't having any of that because, of course, as we know, that he and Frank Sinatra were very good friends, and Dean Martin and those guys. So,
have you ever watched? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Have you? I mean, on the topic, I watched like kind of a black film too, a black show. It's called Them. It's on Amazon Prime right now. It's about.
I haven't, but I mean, if you don't mind talking about it, I would love to.
No, not at all.
Sure.
It's amazing. I finished the whole thing in a day. It's basically about East Compton. So East Compton, LA, back in, I don't know, the 60s or 50s, was all white. Mm-hmm. And so you're following this family, this black family, and it's their first time. It's the first family to move into this white Compton neighborhood. And you just kind of see all of this, terrorizing kind of acts and just like foul racism. And there's also like a spiritual aspect to it. It's kind of like a horror as well. So it kind of uses religion and a cursed burial grounds, which is East Compton, to kind of push the plot. And it's really cool. And they use a lot of beautiful imagery and nuances and I feel like real Black experiences. And you can kind of understand what it was like to be a Black person fearing for their life every single day, whether you're a woman, a man, or a child. And it's really good. You should definitely watch it. And you should watch the Billie Holiday movie. It kind of ties into the Sammy Davis Jr. Film you're talking about. And it shows how she was just like attacked and harassed for basically just being an outspoken Black woman in America. So it's really good.
Yeah, I heard about the Billie Holiday movie. I've been a little apprehensive of it because I
Mhm.
know some other aspect. I'm a big fan of Billie Holiday's. So I'm aware of
Yeah,
some of the aspects of her life. And that's another life story that's like very hard to, it's very hard to watch. I mean,
yeah.
there
I had
weren't a
no
lot of.
idea about her.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Mhm.
she lived some kind of life. Oh my good, and not
She
in a good
she was
way.
a
Yeah, I mean,
crazy
she
woman.
did great
Bad.
things, but on the other side of that, it was just so many things that were just heartbreaking. I mean, you're a kid and you are introduced to these singers and musicians and artists, and you grow to admire and love them, but you never think about the things they had to endure in their lives. And so when I first started learning about Billie Holiday, I was heartbroken. Like, oh my goodness, like I can't believe.
Yeah.
It's like, for example, Ray Charles. It's like someone like that, and just you grow up admiring someone, and then you see all of the troubles that they went through, just to be Ray Charles or be even Michael Jackson or Whitney Houston or somebody like that. And just a battle to just be happy. And that's very unfortunate in this world. And success, and I always say this, that success breeds loneliness, because a lot of people just care about when they're famous, what they can bring as a famous and rich person, and not that this person needs to be happy like everyone else. Everybody wants to be happy. And a lot of times when you're rich and famous, people just care about being around you to sort of sponge off of your lifestyle, and not really
Mhm.
be a friend and be supportive and encourage you to do right by yourself. We look at Whitney Houston, and Whitney Houston didn't happen overnight. She went through what she went through for years. And, she struggled with whatever was going on in her life. Many people believe it was her relationship with Robin, which I knew about Whitney Houston and Robin in the 80s. So that should tell you how long she's been going on with this situation. So you have somebody that's looking for happiness, but even us, that we're not rich and famous people, we have hanger honors that like us for whatever energy we give to them, and they don't
Uh,
care about what we go through. They're just like, I just want to take from you, and I don't care about what's going on in your life. Dawn, you seem to be agreeing there. So
yep. I cut them all off, man. I can't even tell you how many like lifelong girl best friends I've had to cut off because they weren't truly happy for me, Once I started, going through therapy and being stronger and confident, more outspoken, um, they just couldn't absorb, what they wanted from me. They couldn't use me for entertainment or to feel better about themselves.
yeah,
So you can't allow that negativity and vampire like people to be around you. It's toxic and it ruins your mental
yeah,
health, I think. So.
absolutely. And we talked
Mhm.
about those vampires, right, Jim? Couple of, what was that?
Yeah, we sure enough
The week
did.
before last was the vampire
Only
episode.
before that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So it's true, and I'll say the one thing I'll give Jim is he's kind of figured that out a lot sooner than most of us, because he's cuts people off real fast when they're unhealthy.
Hey.
I haven't learned so easily. I'm wise in different ways. I'm not wise in terms of dealing with toxic people, unfortunately. I think sometimes we think that we can take a gamble on people, and they'll choose to do the right thing by you, or and by themselves.
Yeah.
By themselves. That just sounded wrong, but it's just hard, and I think Dawn and myself, we share that empath thing going on there, and that is definitely can be a handicap when you want to help someone and you're committed to trying to help people better themselves. And people, for whatever reason, some people just don't have the energy to do it. Some people have the mental health problems that are beyond what you can do for them. And until they step up and do it for themselves, it's kind of like pouring water in a cup that has a hole in it. It just keeps draining out, and there's not much you can do for it when you want to help someone that either can't because of the mental issues that they have, mental health problems, or they're just not willing to help themselves. You just, it's very difficult. So cutting people off is not always easy. And sometimes I know I can speak for myself, and it sounds like Dawn, we're similar, where it's just not easy cutting people off all the time when we should.
Because you still like, I mean, you love them, right?
Mhm.
It's,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's not like I want to not be your friend or to distance myself. It's like I have to, because me as an empathetic person, I will always put other people before me. And that's something I had to learn, is that I'm just that caring, that I tend to put myself second. So if I'm around people who don't have good intention and I'm putting them first, I'm just being taken advantage of. So,
Right.
and it's like, I don't want to. I believed in you, I trusted you, and now I have to make this decision to move on and let go.
Then that energy gets absorbed. You absorb that negative energy, and it's hard to not be affected, because you can feel people. You feel people, and you can understand where they come from, because you're feeling them. And if they're toxic, that toxicness kind of pours into you, pours into your soul, and it's very hard to deal with. I'm trying to learn how to let people after a certain point in time situate themselves, because I'm the kind of person, I just go 100%. But the problem is, going 100% for somebody that's not 100% into themselves is just not, it's usually not a successful model to build on, really.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
Yeah, so interesting discussion. I definitely would check out them. Sounds like, and definitely Billie Holiday. I will, I said,
watch them. It's gonna be a lot for you if you got a little emotional with Green Book.
Yeah.
There's some like trauma, but it is so beautifully done. It's kind of like a critically acclaimed TV show winning an Emmy or something, I think.
Yeah, so I'll definitely check that out. Like I said, is some of these things are just, when I think about, and I see people here, today, and I'm like, you don't know, you use people sitting up here and they're talking so much crap about what's happening now. You got to think about the people that was given the crap and still knew how to make change. And the thing is, when there's something wrong going on in this society, it's not just you can't just complain about something. You got to bring solutions and work towards solving whatever the issue is. And I feel like right now, not to be critical of people in society, but right now we're at a place where people are just complaining because complaining makes money. So it's a business. So it's like, you got to keep people angry because all these people are out of work if you solve the problem. So if you solve the problem with race, then all these people that their job is to complain about racism, what happens to them? Now they don't get paid anymore. So it's a business. It's just like the people who they build these prisons and they need crime. So they need the elements to,
it's a system.
Create crime. Right.
It's a freaking system. It feeds into each other. And then the corporations feed off the prisons because, that's free labor. So of course they want to keep ranking in, people in jail and yeah.
So we as people who don't want to profit over other people's troubles, we need to come together and find the solutions. And there are people that are doing that. Don't get me wrong, because I meet them all the time in my travels. I've met groups that are like, listen, there's some things going wrong in society. There's a lot of things wrong with this world, but we have to sit down and talk about it and have a dialogue and work that out. So, I need to just keep meeting those people who want to solve issues and not just talk about it so they can profit. Yeah, there's some profiting going on. There's people making millions, hundreds of thousands, and there's going to constantly always be the complaint, but there's never going to be the solution. And my thing is, like I said, I have family that that had to live through the pre-civil rights. Even right after slavery ended, I, had family members, just hearing them here. And the interesting thing about them is they wanted happiness. Happiness is what they wanted. And happiness was family. And through family was reward. They got the reward from having children, having not even just to say, and I don't know why everything in society is about being rich, but that's what we tell everybody now, not being, and it's funny, we don't even talk about being financially sustainable and independent. People talk about being rich, but here's the problem with that. That's another issue in itself, because with money, if you don't know how to manage your money, you end up broke again, no matter how much money you make. And we see all these videos of all these people, top 10 rappers that are broke. And then you see the MC Hammers and people like that. Or, I was Black Rob died yesterday. And to think this guy, he said, I think his advance money was $450,000 or something like that. And the dude had to have piss poor healthcare because he died from kidney failure. And if you're dying from kidney failure, that means you didn't go to the doctor, or when you went, you just didn't have the apparatus to take care of yourself. Because, to go from being sick to having strokes and dead, there's a lack of healthcare. There's a lack of responsibility in this country for people to have healthcare. And even knowing, if you can't afford healthcare, how do you get it? And it's a shame that we don't talk to people about sustaining themselves, and not just to have money, but what to do with it when you have it. And, we want to talk about systemic racism. Let's talk about that, because we don't teach minority communities in this country about how to be successful citizens. We don't explain to them about taxes, about finances, debt, things like that, healthcare. I mean, those are very important things. So it's just amazing when we talk about racism, people just think about the color. But I talked about, and I just had this conversation with Donnie the other day, the issue that I had with him with high school. And I think we talked about this on one of the episodes, and how I had to call out racism with the Department of Education and tell them, I said, you answer me one question and I'll accept your response. And the question was, how do Black kids end up in Black schools, and how do white kids end up in white schools? Because here's the reality of that. The school closest to where Donnie lives is back in high school anyway. So incredible school. Midwood High School is an amazing school. It was one of the best schools in New York City. Now, he lived maybe 10 blocks from there. Now, how could he not get into a school 10 blocks from his house, but can get it to a school that's like 4 or 5 miles away? That wasn't that good of a school. And how does that happen? And then you give some cockamamie excuse, because he didn't do, what did they say? He didn't do the informational session. So you're supposed to register for a session, and then you get preferential treatment. But guess what? He didn't sign up for a session in the school he didn't want to go to, but yet he went there. That wasn't even his own school. It was all the way on the other side of town. So that was the question that I had for them. I was like, and if you can tell me how Black kids are filled up in Black schools and white kids are filled up in white schools, I'll accept that. And he can go to that school that you're sending him to. If you can answer that and tell me how it's fair, I'll send him there with no problem. And of course, they had no answer for it. So he ended up going to a school he wanted to go to. But why should a parent have to go through that? He wasn't a bad student. He didn't get bad grades. There was nothing negative against him for him not to go to a school that he wanted to go to. But unfortunately, when they see who these kids are, a lot of times they send kids that are not white, they send them to these schools that are not white. And it's very unfortunate. When you look at these top schools in New York City, with the exception of schools that you have to take tests to get into, the racial dynamic is ridiculous according to the quality of the school. The better the school is, the whiter the school is, or
Yeah.
affluent. So you're either rich or you're white.
Fucking hell.
And
Sorry.
Yeah.
it's a public school. And it's a public school. That's the sad part. It's a public school. It's
So-
not a private school. It's public.
So
We don't do that at all in Canada. There is no way you're applying for public high school, public like school in any way. No, you just go to where you're closest in your area. There's no debate.
and that's interesting because that's how it used to be here. And I guess that became a problem for them. So then they said,
guess.
no, we can't do that anymore because it's not fair to people who live in bad areas. And that's fine. That's fine if you're going to accept
But
people.
school is school. Like
But-
that's you
but
know.
here-
it's not a
here's-
place for
here's
you
what-
to
here's-
manipulate.
Where I can understand how it sounds fair, because if you live in a bad neighborhood with bad schools, and then you say, well, you're going to give someone the opportunity to go to a good school because they're not zoned to go to this specific school over there. But here's the problem.
Mhm.
Now you say that it's okay. They can go to any school that they want to. They just have to apply to it. But then you apply and you can't go there. So
You can't
you
go
get
there.
you get rewound to go to the school you didn't want to go to in the first place. That's
Mhm.
outrageous. It's like smoke and mirrors. It's like saying, oh yeah, you can go to any school you want, but then you don't get accepted to any school that you want. So it's a weird
That's-
situation where the percentage is not in favor of Black and Hispanic
Mhm.
students. That's what we're really talking about, Black and
Mhm.
Hispanic students, because they're the ones that are disproportionately affected by this predicament. And, there was supposed to be all these hearings. I was told, oh, we can use you to, testify. And, oh man, none of that happened. It's a song and dance. The current chancellor that just left, I don't necessarily agree with the methods that he had in changing that, but he wanted to change it. So the issue, and they kind of sort of sent him out of town with like the residents of New York City with pitchforks and stuff like that. He was pretty much ran out of town because he wanted to make drastic changes where it was fair for other people who weren't being treated fairly. But like I said, some of the methods I didn't agree with. But here's the problem. If you don't agree with something, you sit down and talk it out. You don't remove someone and put the status quo back in, because then change never occurs. You can't put someone, if there's a problem with your car and you have a mechanic that can fix everything but the engine, and the problem is the engine, and then someone says, I could work on the engine, and then you have an issue with the way that they fix the engine. You don't remove that person and I'll put somebody in that's like, I'm just going to ignore the engine now. And that's what's going on right now. So you have a new chancellor. She's an African-American woman, and not to say that she's a bad person, but she's not working on that issue, because she's part of the system. He didn't come from New York. So when he came here, it's like I don't know where he's from. I want to say he's of Mexican heritage. I'm not 100% sure, but he wanted to make things fair for Black and Hispanic students in New York, because they're the ones that get the crap end of the stick. All this. You want to see the worst schools in New York City. Those are the places. They don't get the money. They don't get the support. Unfortunately, the biggest issue that we have in New York is parental involvement. So, Black and Hispanic communities, most of them on the low end of the spectrum of education and finance in terms of economics in their household. So you have a lot of them that are unavailable to be 100% supportive of their kids showing up, and things like that, to open school parent teacher conferences and stuff like that, or they don't understand because they're not they're not well versed in the system in this country.
Mhm.
And many of them are illegal because we're a sanctuary city, so they're afraid they make problems, they get reported. So you have all of these issues because parental involvement is very difficult, because one, the political structure is not in their favor because you go to these politicians and these politicians don't really get involved. They talk, politicians talk, but they don't really get involved. That's the problem. And, that's why I say if people really knew how laws got passed in America, everybody would be breaking into the Capitol, because it's pathetic how laws get passed in America. The people are the least focus on how laws get passed in America. It's all special interests that pass laws for the most part. If you have money and you have influence, you write laws, and that's how
like
it happens.
Lobbyists, right? Isn't
Right.
it like a lobbyist?
Yeah, do them, yes. Do them,
It's
yes,
the
do them.
lobbyists that write the laws. They're the
Basically,
ones that write the laws. They submit
Yes.
and I'm going to tell you, because that was a part of my life for many years. So the lobbyist submits the legislation to the well, not even the legislator, so to the staff person designated to read the submission, and then you work with that staff person, and then they submit it to the legislator that's going to introduce the bill, and that's how it gets submitted into government. And then you get a Senate person. So in New York City, it's a Senate person and an assembly person. They get their versions. They authorize their versions. They merge together with the Assembly and Senate, merge their bill together, and then they send it to the governor. It's the same thing with Congress is a little worse than the New York State government. In Congress, they have all these different committees, and it just takes. The state has it too, but it doesn't take as long in the state as it does in Congress, because Congress is just so big. In New York, it's just a limited amount of Assembly and Senate people, so it can go through a lot faster. And then, of course, you have more reach over most of the people. Like, for example, if you had, I don't know, let's say for the teachers wanted some legislation passed. So you approach the legislator, and you have people in the state that they have interactions with the teachers union, so they get on board with support. Where in Congress, it's not like that, because you have only a small amount. So let's say if you had a national union, the national union isn't as powerful in many other states as it would be like in New York. And I mean powerful in terms of like density, voting blocks and stuff like that, where if you don't support things that the teachers are promoting, that they're not going to support you. So you have these people who have $1 million conglomerates that they show up on the spot, and they're like, oh, we think about in America where the bankruptcy laws would change, that the credit card debt wouldn't reflect on your bankruptcy. So you can file for bankruptcy and still owe credit cards. Think about that. How did that happen in America? How did that happen, that somebody who can't pay their credit card bills can file for bankruptcy, and you can say, okay, you filed for bankruptcy, you did it. All right, you don't have to pay this, you don't have to pay that, but you got to pay your credit cards. How does that happen?
What's the point? Like, I'm telling you, I'm bankrupt.
Right.
Well, yeah.
But see, that's how it happens in America. So that tells you the credit card company has a big time lobby where, I mean, think about credit cards. Credit cards, you're talking about like banks in itself. Then you had like the Discovers, you had all those people, American Express, you got all those people lobbying government. That's billions of dollars, multi-billion dollar industry right there that has the money and influence to sit down with these legislators and ask them to support legislation in terms of credit card debt. So it's amazing when you think about it, how they have the ability to make things happen and don't happen. So average person, myself, if you were living in this country, Donnie, average people, we just have no chance. We just got to get on the right side of an issue with the right people. Because if you don't have a group of people that can make a change, you forget it. It doesn't matter how right the topic is, you're not going to get any support. And I've experienced that firsthand when a friend of mine was illegally, and I'm going to tell you illegally prosecuted. Now, I found out eventually, in all fairness, that he was guilty of what he did, but the procedure in how they arrested him was illegal. So he was originally prosecuted for something in the Bronx that he committed And the Manhattan DA decided they wanted to prosecute him because they said, oh, they passed through Manhattan. So they use a technicality to put him in prison. So what they did is they said, oh, you're in the Bronx. So how did they drive? They had to drive through Manhattan to get to the Bronx. So technically they committed the same crime that you caught them for in the Bronx. So they charged them in Manhattan. So the Bronx wanted to drop the case. And then Manhattan said, we're going to put him in prison. Now, at the time, we didn't know what he was exactly guilty of because no one was testifying against him. There was 3 people involved. There was one informant that was in the car, and there was 3 other people. So no one knew what anyone was guilty of. And the lawyer for him, because he didn't disclose fully to the lawyer what he exactly did, was banking on them not finding this evidence. So he challenged the prosecution and the judge, in which the judge was willing to drop the case if this thing happened, this evidence wasn't proven. And that's where it fell apart because he lied and then the evidence was there. So basically, to make a long story short, they said, oh, if he used his phone, they should have the evidence on the phone. So they challenged the prosecution to look through the phone and see if the evidence was there against him. And unfortunately, he told his lawyer the not the truth. And so when they looked through the phone, they found the evidence, and that's how he was convicted. And that's why it's important, people, be honest with your attorneys, because you don't want to be put in a situation where you're lying and they can't defend you. You know, I used to be a union shop steward many years ago, and you'd be surprised how many times we had our union members lying to us. And then you go into the meeting with the human resources, and they're like, oh, you know, you come in there like a pit bull, and then they hand you a stack of papers, and they're like, here's the evidence. And you look bold-faced dumb because you're like, I can't believe I asked you to tell me everything and you lied to me. And now the evidence showed me that you lied. It's a total embarrassment. And it's very interesting how people, they just refuse to be honest with you and come out and tell you the truth. It's just very sad. Especially when you're charged to defend them. I mean, I was charged with defending my union members, and I was pretty good as a shop steward. I was good at my job. But then you have people just lying to you to your face. When you say, are you sure there's nothing? Are you sure that there's no evidence? No, there's nothing. And then you see a freaking mountain of evidence. It's just outrageous. So, yeah, well, enough of that. All right, so I guess it's time to get into what everybody comes for, the nitty gritty. So today's episode, of course, on The Truth Is Still Straight is the topic. Of course, this is from one of my favorite movies. Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? And that's from my favorite movie, Rush Hour, when Chris Tucker tells that to Jackie Chan when he gets off the plane. And then, of course, in Rush Hour 2, when Jackie Chan responds in kind to Chris Tucker's character, the same thing. So basically, the subtopic of that is communication, listening, and understanding. Very important, guys and ladies. So I'll sort of intro that. So some back version to why I'm bringing this up is because we've had some similar conversations in previous episodes. And I know some of you are really honing down on specific messages that we're given. And I want to sort of fine tune what we're actually talking about. So here's the thing, and I'll start this off. Communication. You know, we always talk about communication when we talk about relationships, right? That's always a qualification for many people. When you say, what do you want in a relationship? And, you know, looks, whatever. But, you know, people who call themselves aware, you know, people wear good people. Communication is definitely a qualification or a character trait that we look for in people. But here's the truth about communication. People are not good at communicating. I'm just going to be honest right there. I'm going to say that the average everyday person is not, we're good at talking most of the times, but we're not good at communicating. expressing our feelings, expressing sentiment, expressing what we want sometimes, expressing weakness, vulnerability, things like that, things that are troubling ourselves, how to comfort others. So those are things in relationship, or even to express, communicate what we know about ourselves. You know, some people, it's very hard for them to talk about themselves. You can ask people, oh, tell me, perfect example. We had a conversation a few weeks ago about the Ayanna Vanzant episode with Shay Johnson. And when I forget what the psychologist is, her name on the show, but she passed a message from Ayanna to ask them what they saw when they looked in the mirror. And they said a beautiful, strong Black queen or whatever it was. Anyway, they paid a lot of compliments about themselves, but here's what the problem was. The mirror was distorted. So never once was exactly what they saw in the mirror, and it's distorted image. That never came out in the conversation. So communicating is just so difficult for people to do. Just in general, you can ask an adult to stand up in front of people and give a speech and they'll freeze and they'll be afraid. And it's like funerals too. It's like, you ever been to a wake where they're like, does anyone have anything to say about the person? And nobody wants to say anything, but then the minute someone else gets up and then everybody follows behind that person. So I want to just start off with the communication, turn it over to Dawn, see if how she feels about what I just said and what she has to add to the recipe here. And then we can move on to Jim and Donnie. So Dawn, take it over, please.
Alrighty. Well, I totally agree with everything that you said. I think that every person kind of needs good communication to have a good relationship, whether that's in the workplace or that's your personal life. Everything starts with how you talk to each other and how you respect each other. So I agree with that. And honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm not a great communicator, especially these days with like all the social media apps and the texting and everything that's online. I find that I'm just way better at like face-to-face interaction, reading the nonverbal communications and just like kind of really seeing that person and being there. So I find for me, it stems from like my bad communication could kind of stem from maybe insecurity or a lack of practice. And by that is what I mean, a lack of good communication practice, because it doesn't just happen overnight. It's an acquired skill. And it's something that I've been looking into since I've been doing this entrepreneurship program, and I'll have to be dealing with people, every day for the rest of my life. And I want to make sure that I have strong skills and I can convey what I need to in a concise manner. So I've been trying to practice getting better at it, even with you guys. Sometimes I go days without texting, maybe even a week or so, and it's just because I'm still working on it. So it's a skill that's definitely something you're working your whole life on.
Yeah, I've been bashing you in my mind all the time. Like, I can't believe I'm getting
You're not the
ghosted
only
here.
one.
About to call MTV on her or something and getting ghosted over here.
Yeah, and it's never that. It's like I said, it's a lot of me. I deal with depression and anxiety, and I been going through therapy and dealing with why I don't have great communication skills, and it's because it's out of fear, it's out of a lack, it's out of insecurities of myself, and also just detaching, because sometimes I feel that like I can't get the communication I want through text, so then it kind of demotivates me to do it. Even though I should, even though I want to, it still is like, I can't see them, I can't really talk to them, I can't get what I want. So I guess I'll just wait until I can talk to them, or I don't know.
Well, listen here, listen. Before we even go over to Jim, listen, we're your family here. So I want you to, I have your back. If you need an escape, I'm here for you. Definitely don't ever feel like you have to wait. I would definitely be there for you, make time for you, support you, whatever it is that you need. That's what we're here for. So, don't avoid that. When there's times, maybe there'll be some time that you need someone. we're here. I'm definitely here. I'm sure
I know
Jen
that.
feels the same. I can't speak for anyone else, but speaking for myself, I'm
Yeah.
here. And if you need support, I'm here. Sometimes you just need a escape, venting, some perspective. So never feel like you have to wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Listen, off the show, you're still a part of our lives. I think about you
Yeah.
every day. Just like I think about Jim and Donnie, LaDonna, and Danica, I love you guys very much. That's just not us just to say to get likes and subscriptions on YouTube and other places.
Rack it up.
Right. It's sincere, it's a sincere thing. And I just, listen, just know that we're here for you. We're definitely here for you. We could always listen. The good thing about technology is we don't have to use long distance. There's Wi-Fi calling, FaceTime, YouTube, not YouTube, Zoom, WhatsApp. There's, all those things you can contact people. So listen, never, don't ever feel above just, listen, I call Jim all the time. I call Jim all the time. He's my sounding board. If there's trouble with the world and I want to, whine and cry or whatever, I call Jen, or whoever I can think of that I know won't mind listening to my wine and cheese. But just know that even if you decide not to, just never feel like we're not here for you. And I can speak that for Jim because I know that he admires you the way I admire you. We value you and appreciate you a whole lot. So never feel like you're alone. Please don't do that. That defeats the purpose of this show. I'm gonna have to take a trip out there and bop you. Right. All right, Jim.
You're gonna have to come to Canada sometime.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm coming to New York for sure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we'll definitely take good care of you over here. Definitely.
I bet.
Yeah, we roll out the red carpet. So just know that, don't feel alone. And that's for anybody, that we're associated with that considers us friends or loved ones, whoever's listening. Unfortunately, well, I want to get to Jim. I don't want to do all the talking here. Jim, please. I don't want you to fall asleep listening to my soothing and therapeutic.
Yes, Barry White. Yes, Barry White. I agree with everything that you said. I myself am a horrible communicator. Usually, it's usually due to more to my temperament than anything. It's a skill that I've been trying to work on for years, and it has allowed me to try and be a better talker with expressing on what's going on with myself, and to have people feel more comfortable in talking to me about that in that type of way. There is some things I have to work on with communication. That's trying to make more time, or try to space out individuals that call me, looking for someone to talking to, because when you become an effective communicator, and I have learned this, other individuals will see that and seek you out at the same time, and it's kind of hard to try to give everyone equal time in what you want to talk to them. And I think the more that I learn about communicating with others and how to, I won't say maximize, but to try to get, your ideas and point across in a subtle way, and, somewhere it's a conversation piece instead of escalating, is kind of hard for me as well. But as more as you learn and you can identify your markers on what's wrong and how you communicate with others, it becomes a little bit easier over time. I still have a lot of work to do. I tend to, I won't say ghost, but with my personality, I've been mostly on my own and thinking and stuff like that. So I'll go weeks without contacting anyone, but as soon as I contact someone, it's, I just pick up where I left off. And I think most individuals appreciate that, because it means like nothing's changed, or, nothing's that drastic. And, I'm just the same person. It's just I've just been doing a lot of other things. I try not to make it a personal issue on why I don't talk to people. It's just that, it's me. It's just, I do other things. I try to keep myself occupied. And that is helpful and hurtful for my sanity's sake, because when I'm trying to keep occupied for myself, I may be leaving somebody else behind that may need me. So it's hard to balance it out. And that communication and balancing out that effect is my problem. And I work on it. I'm not saying it's easy, it's a habit I had since I was a kid. And that's the hardest habit for me to break. I think that's the top hard habit for me to break, is that type of communication that I have. And, with help and a little bit more time, I feel like I got the code cracked, but it's just a mountain for me to climb.
Yeah, I want to agree to that. And yeah, Jim, you definitely are keep things to the chest there. And hopefully, I mean, I know when you have something to say, you have something to say, but I know you're definitely somebody who kind of keeps things to yourself. And it may work for you. I mean, I can't see. So like you said, you are willing to work on things. So, I guess that's not necessarily a bad thing when somebody's going through something and need to work on something. But yeah, so hopefully, we can work on that, because I know you definitely keep things to yourself. So hopefully in the future you feel more comfortable with other things. I know you're comfortable with certain things, but then other things you're not comfortable, because we want to support you too, right? So, I don't want you to only be because you're supportive to everybody. That's the one compliment that I do have for you. You're a very supportive person. When people are in need, you show up. You're like 911, but instead of joking your town, you come on time. That's the one thing that I give you. It's never been a problem with you being supportive to anybody. And, that's the one thing I know no one can take away from you, is your support. All right, Donnie. So you've been there for a while, because I've been talking a lot. And so we're finally getting over to you almost an hour later. So what do you have to share with us?
Sure. It's no problem, by the way. I mean, I should be able to listen to you speak for a while by now, right? I've known you forever, literally, right?
Yeah, or your life.
Yeah, but yeah, I just want to say, Don, I 100% understand your journey with mental health. Of course, I'm doing my own.
Yes, thank you.
And while my issues lie elsewhere, besides communication. I guess I'm fortunate for that, but obviously it means I have to deal with something else. However, throughout my time talking to people and living life, I think I've discovered a big reason why people often have a issue with communication is they don't, when they were younger, they never had their thoughts be validated by a parent or family members. Either they got the kids should be seen, not heard treatment. And then when they grew up, they thought, you should just listen to me because I'm older than you, or whatever else. A lot of the time, they in those early development stages, they didn't ever have people give value to what they were saying. So when they try as an adult to do that, they can't, because they never had that foundation to set them up for the future. Yeah, I just want to throw that in there, because I think it's hard to see that when you're in it.
Yeah. Definitely, I agree with that. So let's talk about that, because that's definitely is funny. Now I don't even have to introduce that into the second portion of this communication conversation, because that was exactly kind of what I wanted to talk about, is how do we get where we're not able to communicate? And I think that's a key and essential to what Donnie just said. And that's because we weren't trained to communicate for whatever reason. And that's unfortunate, because we start off as children and turn into adults carrying these things over to adulthood. And it's a widespread thing. I mean, I think about people that speak very well, and those people had to learn how to speak. When Obama was president and you hear him talk, they don't just start talking like that. They have to get trained. They have to learn. And I know some years ago at work that I was part of this thing called the Speakers Bureau, and we got trained with the same people who trained Bill Clinton how to speak. And it's a process in learning how to communicate, getting in front of people and being able to express your message. And that's something that we don't get from our parents, because let's be honest, I can't speak for Dawn, but I know myself and I know Donnie's parents because I'm one of them. And Jim, we just didn't come from a world where communication was something that we were taught to do. So we're not taught to communicate. And like Donnie said, we're taught that children should be seen and not heard in many aspects. You can't express your feelings. You're wrong if your parent thinks you're wrong. You're speak when spoken to, but that's not communicating. So it's basically you're responding. And that's going to be one of the next topics. I don't want to go too far ahead. So that's actually going to be one of the next topics, but we're not trained. We lack preparation in communicating. And most of the times, only people who learn how to communicate are people who are going into the public eye, like actors and actresses, singers, and politicians and people like that. People are in the public eye where they have to stand in front of people, so they get the training. And those things are very expensive. But for the rest of the world who doesn't go into those type of things, learning to communicate is just virtually impossible, because how do you start? How do you express yourself? And so that's so I'm going to set the tone off for that, and then we can get into that. So I guess maybe we can give ideas for people to learn how to communicate. And I'm going to put this out there, and then we can all add to that and, give our thoughts to what we should be doing. And the first thing, definitely, if you want to learn how to better communicate, you should write things down that you want to say. So if you have things in your heart that you want to share, you should write it down, because when you're writing something down, you don't have to try to remember what it is that you wanted to say in the moment. So today you might feel a certain way, just write it down, but write it to read it, not write it to text message, not write it to email, not write it for it to go nowhere, because you want to be able to relay sentiment, whether it's in response or whether it's for you reaching out to somebody and expressing your feeling. So that's the first thing that I'm suggesting. So I'm just kind of gonna, I guess, I don't want to leave that alone in saying that. But that's the first thing that I suggest. So Dawn, if you don't mind sort of editing that comment and fine tuning with some of your wisdom in terms of writing things down, and then I'll go down the line to everyone else, and then we can kind of go. You'll give yours after, and then Donnie and Jim, and then Donnie, and then we'll move on from there.
For sure. I also could we backtrack to something later, like how we're talking about?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, because okay, cool. Because I think what you said, Donnie, was like so spot on, dude. Like that's, for me, that is the epitome of why I have communication issues, is because I was taught poorly how to communicate my whole developmental life. So now we're rewiring. But to get to your question about, what should we do to kind of give solutions, I think writing is huge. You understand yourself and you understand your brain because it's right there. It's right here on this piece of paper. And, you can analyze and you can reflect and you can just get better. So I think that's a really brilliant idea. Another thing I think people should do to communicate more effectively, and I say this because I talked about my insecurity, and also, Jim, you touched upon this, is that do not take everything so personally. When I was working for this restaurant called Cactus Club, and I realized I had horrible communication skills because I took everything personally. I thought that everything that we were talking about was about me. I in my head, I retracted everything back to myself, and I wasn't able to just look at the situation without emotion. And I think when you make everything personal, you're not able to think logically and think clearly. And now that I don't take things so personally, and I kind of just like give people the benefit of the doubt, like, why should I assume they're talking about me? Why would I, create this like negative mindset? Once I stopped taking things personally, I I've had a lot better communication because I'm more understanding, I'm better at listening, and I'm just not like emotional. I'm just taking things for face value, and that's clear communication, I think.
Oh, that's excellent. So Jim, you run right in there like you running through a sprinkler and don't want to get wet.
What you got is very much true. But don't take personally and write things down at the moment so you don't forget it. For me personally, and I'm not trying to be bleak here, but my first even thinking about getting in touch with communication and how I felt was at my first high school job, no, my second high school job, and I was working at a diagnostic center, and they have a psychiatric psychology division. And the person I was working under was a therapist. So I guess for me to understand working in therapy, he had a session with me, and that really exposed a lot of gaps in my communications. And it's just what Jonathan said, you know, politicians, they prepare for public life, actors, they prepare for public life. Those sessions helped me prepare for just my personal life, because I realized that I was really deficient in how I interacted with people, children my own age, not children, teenagers my own age. I'm saying children, but it started when I was young. When I did this, students my own age, my own peers, adults. It was lacking because of, my childhood upbringing with what Donnie said, children should be seen and not heard. But it was more than that. It was the realization that my parents have poor communication skills, and they didn't really know how to pass on to their children. They followed that type of advice because they believed that's what it was, but they followed that same thing when they were children. So that deficiency is always there. It was always there for me. And my parents had that deficiency. And I thought that deficiency was normal. That type of behavior was normal because it's so widespread. That type of behavior is normalized. And with those sessions, I realized that was not normalized. It wasn't normal at all. It was just a way of covering up a deficiency. And with those sessions, it made me realize that as a person who's going out into the world, because I was in high school, as a person who's have to go out into the world, I had to readjust and reevaluate. Had to be reevaluated on my communication skills and go beyond what I consider normal and the type of people I interacted with, because that really was deficient as well. And with communication, unfortunately, you have to go outside your comfort zone. You know, you have to talk to other people that you may not be able to click with so quickly. It's not because of the fact that you don't have the same likes or dislikes. It's just because that your way of communication is different from urban to rural, from office to out of office, to student to teacher. And those type of relationships help me with how I should communicate with others, when you should be able to use those type of communication skills, because different skills require for different people that you want to come in contact with. And basically have a temperance when you talk to anyone in communication. You can't let your emotions or temper, or even something that you may not understand that you hear, into making the type of conversation escalate. And sometimes you may hear things that you may not understand, and it's okay, but you have to say that you don't understand, because usually the miscommunication is that someone doesn't understand. And it's okay for you not to understand, but you have to get clarification. And with those sessions, that's what helped me start off. I didn't really start off with, writing things down. I like the simple things. I never started off with the simple things. It was that type of complex interaction that helped me get started. So it's not the same for everyone. Most of the people, you start with yourself. I just started the weird way, and that was my communication. That was with me.
Yeah, that's pretty good. It's funny that you said that. That was actually on the list there about understanding. So Donnie, I'm gonna go back to that because definitely want to bring that topic up about understanding. So Donnie, so ready for you? What do you have for us? If you feel like there's anything you need to tack on with what any of us said, please do share with us whatever you have.
Yeah, I've got something. I was, I think a lot of people, maybe once upon a time, I would have done this because even though I'd consider myself to be good at communicating, I think a lot of people mistake good for not needing any more improvement. And one of the biggest issues, even if you, this is a thing that people with who are able to communicate will do. They'll do this thing where they try to read the other person's mind a lot. I mean, anyone can do this, don't get me wrong, but I've seen this a lot with people like this because if you for example think you know how to communicate well, then you're cycling through all the possibilities in your mind because you know how you do it, and you just project your thoughts onto someone else. And even if you're not good at communication, of course, that could be present. I'd say never try to predict what someone else will say to you because your own mind will have will form something crazier than could ever actually be possible, most likely. Um, also, I wanted to throw this in here too. Just a recommendation that when you're going to communicate, I'd at least with another person, I'd say set aside like enough time to do so, because I think a lot of people try to rush communication and then they slip up because they're trying to say so many things, but they don't know how to do that in a restricted amount of time. If you're going to try to communicate with someone, I would say just make sure you have enough time to have to stumble over your words a little bit. You give yourself that room to be able to fully explain yourself, especially if you're already having issues with it.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And it's funny. So what I wanted to say next actually kind of ties into what you just said there. The first thing about predicting what someone will say. And that is a big problem that people have in communication, and that's listening. So a lot of people listen to respond and don't listen to understand. So they don't want you to say what you have to say so they can get an understanding. They want to listen to see what they can answer back to you. And a lot of times when that happens, people don't hear the right thing because they don't want clarity. So a lot of times people would jump on something you said instead of asking you what you meant to say. Mm-hmm. And that's very important because it happens all the time. More than not, it's going to happen more than 90% of I've never been and I'm being honest. I mean, I try to do it now when I have conflict with people and I'm communicating with them, is try to ask for clarity, or if they're accusing me of something, clarifying things myself, because people don't listen. And you'd be surprised. And I've had this happen to me so many times where I could say something and what I said was not listened to at all because they didn't listen to understand. They wanted to say what they felt. So it's like, okay, I feel this way about you. So it's like, I'll give you a perfect example. So let's say I'm angry at Dawn and I'm having a conversation with her and she's telling me about something that I did to her that upset her. But instead of listening and hearing what she said and understanding where she's coming from, I just want to get my point out. So I'm just waiting for her to finish. I'm like, but you know what? You didn't contact me. You ghosted me for like 3 weeks. And I sent you a message and you didn't respond to me, instead of addressing what it is that you said and try to understand and put that to bed. So a lot of times people, they don't they just want to respond how they feel. And it's okay that you want to respond to how you feel about something, but you have to take what somebody says to you first. Before you respond how you feel, you have to respond to what somebody just told you. And so many people don't do that. They just answer back how they feel about an issue. And that's not the problem, because if somebody has an issue with you, or there's an issue at hand that both of you need to resolve, the person giving you the information has to be able to clarify what they're saying. And if you don't understand, you got to get clarification from that person. And then you in kind do the same thing. And that is such a missing part in relationships with people, because person one is saying exactly what they feel, and then person two is saying exactly what they feel, and no one's talking it out. And people are not talking it out. So it's like an argument. So you're arguing with someone, and instead of hashing out whatever the differences are, all you're doing is airing your grievances and leaving them there. Because then you yell, this person yells, this person speaks, you speak, and then it's like, what's the resolution? So there has to be steps in communicating. Just like when you write a persuasive essay, you write a letter to somebody, there's stages in it. You don't just write all crazy things on a paper. You have to have the opening, the body, and the closing. And even in the body itself, this how you write a letter is an introduction in the letter, what you want, and in the closing in a letter. And that's the same thing when you have a conversation with someone and you're talking and this person is expressing, you got to listen to them, and then you respond to what they said. And then if you have something to answer back, you do it in kind. And then the person, if they're trying to be fair like you, they'll give you the same respect. And if not, you kind of ask them if they hear you out too. And if they don't, then that's a sign of a bigger problem that is beyond what you're trying to do. But here we're not getting to that point yet. So Dawn, what do you have from there?
So I think that you said a lot of, once again, everybody says really great things here. I feel like we're all on the same page on like what we kind of think is important and what we value. So it's kind of easy to talk to you guys about all this crap. So what I kind of wrote was I wanted to go back to what I think Jim said, something about, the people that you're around, and making sure that, I think that it's important to be around different types of people. Diversity is important when you're growing up. So you can kind of learn, different situations, how to react in different, with different people who are rural, Black, uneducated, highly educated. It allows you to kind of be a chameleon in that way. And it allows you to be a lot more successful in your, career or personal life. So that's a bonus. And I do think that I was one of those people that, was listening to respond. And that's kind of what happened at Cactus, is that like I was communicating with people all the time, communicating with like 50 to like 40 people a day, and wasn't really active listening. And I wasn't really retaining anything, and I wasn't really like building my relationship because I couldn't communicate properly. And I had to leave that place because I really couldn't communicate properly with anybody there. And so that's why last year with my whole like reflection, I really had to look in and be like, okay, how am I not communicating properly with people? Like, what am I doing to not, maybe seem like I'm active listening, or maybe I'm not really responding the way I should. Maybe I'm just thinking about, something completely different and not tying into the topic. So that was like a huge, and it still is a huge curveball for me to kind of get over. That's why I write everything down, because sometimes my active listening isn't great, and I have to really be attentive.
I think that's great. And that's what I appreciate that you do in the show, because I mean, it makes engagement a lot easier to write things down that you want to say, instead of waiting and then maybe something you had to say kind of disappears in the universe, or the translation changes because now you've kind of grasped onto another thought, and then you have a thought behind that thought, and then
so many thoughts.
Right.
Yeah.
But can I say one more thing actually that I thought was really important about you saying how I think you're kind of saying this, but this is what I got, is that, we can't control others' emotions, but we can control our reaction.
Correct.
And so
Yes.
understanding is the foundation of that, because if you
Yes.
have an understanding of that person, where they're coming from, you're not going to react like, jumping down their throat and, attacking them, because they just shared with you their side, their view,
Yes.
their
Yes.
experience in life. And we have to value that as people when we're communicating with each other. And I think that can go to even a bigger scale with race relations, and why, people haven't been listening to Black people in America for this whole time. We've been telling you these issues. We've been telling you that, there's systematic oppression, there is a bias, there is a lot of violence, there's all this stuff going on behind the scenes. But I think that the other side wasn't ready to understand it, and they weren't actively listening to like really what was going on. So that's unfortunate for America, but we're getting better.
Yeah, certainly. And the
We're
good thing
getting
about that, and I look at Donnie's generation, and I think Donnie's generation is doing a lot better than the groups before his, because I know I don't want to get too far out of the discussion about relationships, but I know Donnie's issue with dating and racism and stuff like that. And I remember a time where he had a girlfriend that his parents weren't appreciative of who he was. And, I remember his classmates having the same conversations. They came over and, we were sitting in the living room, and I was kind of listening to them have their discussions about how a certain number of their parents were racist and didn't want them dating this race of kids or this race. And so I could see the displeasure in these young people and not wanting to be like that. So I think with time that becomes a little easier, because the younger generation is a lot more open to listening than people stretching between us and him. So there's hope, like you said. Well, I don't want to get too
For
much
sure.
over the relationship, because
Well,
go
can I
ahead.
say one more thing before you leave? Nope.
Well, I'm not leaving, but I want to give it over to Donnie.
Okay, Donnie, do you mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Of course. Now I forget.
See, they just wrote it down. You see,
Writing.
that's exactly what I was
I did
telling
write it
you.
down. Oh my goodness. There's just so much going on over here. Whatever. I'll get back to it.
Maybe you'll remember again and you can go back to it. All right, Donnie.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to draw the discussion a little bit away from relationships, but please.
Please, my brain's also all over, so please just give me just a little bit of direction.
Okay, so basically we were discussing about listening to understand and not listening to respond. And then of course, your understanding of what you feel is important in terms of communicating as well. You may have your own perspective that you want to share.
Yes. So I was sitting here thinking about my own experience in relationships. And at one time I was doing the listening to respond thing, just like you, Don. And I think my reason for it, and also this is just a piece of advice, you always try to investigate the causes for things you do, if you get what I'm saying. But I think the reason for it was from a previous relationship, we had a cycle of constantly arguing. So it felt like arguments weren't a thing that were meant to resolve something. It just felt like someone has to prove who's right at this point.
Right. And blow off steam.
So when I went on to the next relationship, I had that behavior, and it just carried over straight because I had no reason to change, I guess, because it was working in that previous relationship. I think that's a big thing that happens to people. I think a lot of people get scorned from previous experiences, and they're less willing to hear things out because maybe it sounds like something they already dealt with, so they're just writing it off, or maybe they just never had productive discussions or whatever else. I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I just wanted to say, go ahead.
Yeah, discussions about it, very good. Yeah.
You have more to add, or you're finished?
No. I want to.
That's pretty good. I like that you said that, because that's so true. That's like making a house, and people just add on to their dysfunction when they go from one relationship to the next and they don't change those things about themselves. Because a lot of times you always hear people say, I'm going to be myself. But that's not necessarily the best thing, being yourself, because if you need to improve yourself for the sake of getting along with others, and I just hate for people to say, I'm just going to be me. I'm just going to be keep it 100 and stuff like that. But that doesn't always work. It doesn't always work out in society because I know people who lost out a lot from being real. And, I tell people, you got to know when to be real. Like, where I work at, my boss respects my opinion, but I'm not going to be disrespectful to my boss because I'm keeping it 100. You know what I mean? I'll be out of a job if I'm disrespecting her. So where I work at, I get along very well. For the most part, I've gotten along well with anyone that I work for, whether they were good bosses or bad bosses. But the one thing that I know is you have to learn how to say things in the way that you can get along while you're getting your point across. And that's what's important. You have to be able to get along with the person when you're expressing yourself and listening to what they have to say in return. You can't get like Dawn said earlier, you can't take it personally. Even if you're doing something wrong, or even if this person feels like you're doing something wrong and you don't feel like you're doing something wrong, you have to get to the root of why this person is thinking whatever you're doing to them is wrong. So if I'm pointing out to Dawn and I told Dawn, I'm mad at you because you ghosted me for 3 weeks and I sent you 10,000 texts or whatever, and you didn't respond. Now we have to come to the understanding of why this is happening, because me telling her that and her getting upset that I'm telling her I'm angry at her is not going to solve the problem. That's what people do. So I give my grievance to her and now she's upset. How dare you? You don't know what I'm going through, and that's usually what happens, right? A lot of people say, oh, you don't know what I'm going through. Okay, I don't know what you're going through. So tell me. And that's the point. So a conversation has to be a conversation. And if you can't have the conversation at that point in time, then you need to reconvene when you can have the discussion. And that's where, when you meet someone, you have to set the boundaries of how you're going to communicate when you can't communicate. Because we have to understand, if you're not able to express yourself at that moment, then the person that you're dealing with has to come to an understanding. Well, when can we have this discussion and be okay with that? Because a lot of times people want to do things on their terms. And if you want a meaningful relationship with somebody, it has to be when the time is right and not on your personal term. Because the person is not telling you they can't talk to you right now because they don't want to. They just don't know how to at that moment, many times. I'm not saying that there are people who just don't want to have a conversation because they're lazy. There's plenty of people like that. But we're talking about the average person that doesn't know how to communicate. We've all said here there's struggles with our communication. And it's not that we can't have a conversation. It's when it's time for those tough conversations where it can be sensitive, or it could be something that we don't know how to talk about, that we have to get the strength and the understanding of ourselves to express it sufficiently to the person that we need to get our thoughts across to. So I'm glad that you spoke on that, Don. It was very important. So again, back to what Jim was saying earlier, is the understanding. Understanding takes time, and understanding takes listening. With listen to understand is understanding to listen. And so they both are equal partners, because you need to understand that you have to listen to what people have to say, not when they're just explaining how they feel about you, but when they're talking in general. I think about how many people I've dated and been in relationships with, and they don't know anything about me. And it's not that I didn't share anything with them, it's that they didn't bother to listen to what I was saying to them when they were supposed to be getting to know me. So you have to understand to listen, and listen to understand. Those are things that are equal partners, because a lot of people don't understand that they have to listen to what people are saying. So if I know, for example, you're allergic to peanuts, and I'm giving you M&M peanuts, what does that say about me? I didn't really take the time to listen to you and understand what you were telling me. And that's the problem that people have in communications. A lot of people love talking, but a lot of people don't like listening and understanding that they must listen. So that's kind of where I wanted to go in terms of the point of communication. Dawn, you can go anywhere with this, don't definitely have to tack on to what I'm saying, but wherever you want to go through this is freestyle verses now. So whatever you have, you can drop some lyrics.
All right, let me just drop a beat right now. I actually remembered what I was going to say before. I did write it down. It looks like chicken scratches, so I couldn't read it. But I think when you were saying how, the Gen Zs, how they are so willing to understand each other and how to like kind of break the cycles of that communication. I think it's because this generation is so connected to everybody. We are so socially saturated with apps, with social media, with MSN, with interactive TV, with YouTube, with this and that. It's like, we have more friends and more access to people than we've ever had in history. Like before, people would have to wait weeks to hear from their friends, wait months to hear from their loved ones. And now you can have a million conversations in one day. And to me, I think that's where my anxiety kicks in and it gets overwhelming, because I know that I only have 24 hours in a day, and maybe I can't talk to everybody, and then I have to choose, and then I get overwhelmed again. And I'm like, well, I don't want to choose. Like I'll talk to them tomorrow. Like what? Like it's a weird, frustrating cycle in my head where if I just kind of toned it down and focused maybe on one conversation at a time, really effectively listening to one person and really just doing that, it would help me out a lot more. But I just kind of wanted to say it's kind of crazy that in history we're so like we have so many social avenues to explore, and we're connected. But also, I think that what you said about keeping it real is not always the best answer. And I wrote that we have to learn how to have a filter, because these filters will help you. Yeah, yes. I had no idea. Once again, bad communication girl over here. I was screw y'all, I'm gonna tell you how it is, like to my mama, to my boss, like, I changed in certain situations, but for the most part, I had like a fixed mindset where how it is how it is, and I can't grow or I can't change. So with this filter, I think this is great for our viewers to understand, is because people don't really talk about it a lot, because people have this thing of being real and authentic, but you got to adapt. Adaptability is the key. And that's where you're going to have the most favorable outcomes and success, in my opinion. And I think each situation is different. So if you can kind of mold yourself to communicate with that person a certain way, like especially if you're having a negative conversation or if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you can clock into that higher emotional self, that higher emotional intelligence, where it's not all about you, you're focused on the true emotions of the situations. You're focused on the clarity and the reality of what's really going on, not just how you're feeling personally. You're taking in everything. I find that that's where understanding begins. And absolutely. I think that, you can read the nonverbal cues. You are effectively listening. You truly have an understanding because you just flipped that switch, because you just said, okay, maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe I should just come back. Or maybe that's my teacher. Maybe I shouldn't go tell him to like screw off if I'm upset about a homework assignment, like little things like that will save you so much heartache and pain in the long run. And especially if you care about the particular relationship, you definitely got to make sure that you are communicating with them in a way that's empathetic and understanding and respectful to them, because you care about them. You want them in your life. So why are you gonna react like an a-hole and not try to understand and get to the root of the actual problem so you can fix it and you can grow and you can have a beautiful, long-lasting marriage or friendship or co-working relationship, I think filtering is so important. I just learned about this the other day, and I
want to speak to that because I think I talked about this recently, but that actually happened to me. And, I was having a disagreement with a friend of mine, and I know she got very upset and started cursing me out. So in the dispute, there was some cursing out going. And instead of getting, upset about it, I paused the situation and addressed what made her upset at whatever it was that we were talking about. So once we got talking, and then I expressed where I was coming from in the discussion, the issue sort of resolved itself, because I guess now she understood the perspective of where I was coming from, that there was no maliciousness involved in the conversation or whatever her thoughts may have been, that it wasn't from a place where it was like me feeling any negative feeling towards her or whatever. And then once I stood there and I listened to I listened to everything she had to say. And then my response to her was, listen, this is where I'm coming from. Again, the filter thing, like you said. And I said, listen, this is where where I'm from. This is how we engage people. We engage people is a very strong conversation. When we have conversations, it's a different world. She's not from New York. So of course, people have discussions in New York in urban areas. Most of my life I lived in Brooklyn. People from New York City, urban streets, we talk a certain way. If the outside person listened to it, they would think we're about to kill each other. I mean, we yelling and screaming at people. Like I had a coworker, he's from Brooklyn too. We would tell each other, oh, you don't know anything, you're stupid. We would say stuff like that, but that was just a discussion. It was not like he was angry at me after I said what I said. I wasn't angry at him. That's just how two guys that are passionate about how they feel, that's how they talk. There was some yelling, some cursing involved. But after we've had it, there was a guy that's not from, he's from the suburbs. I'll just leave it there. And he was like, oh my God. But that was just our language. It wasn't any personal thing. Again, I didn't take it any way against me. He didn't take it any way against him. We are wonderful friends to this day. If he has anything he wants to talk to me about, he reaches out to me. I reach out to him. So I had to understand that not everybody is used to that type of environment. So when that was brought to my attention, that's when the filter was born. And I was like, I apologize. That's something that I'm used to doing, but everybody shouldn't be treated the same way. People need to be treated to according to how they receive things. If you receive things in a different manner, I should give you things, not the way that I want to give it to you, but in the way that you require it. Because it's not fair that I say, no, eat this food this way. So you don't eat pork, but I'm like, here's this bacon. No, if I know you don't eat pork and you're coming to my house for dinner, why would I make you pork? That's just selfish. I might eat pork, but you don't. And you shouldn't require people to do things that you do because you're used to doing them. Everybody's,
and then
you gotta
getting mad because they don't want to eat the
correct.
bacon.
So you have to treat people as the individuals that they are. One size doesn't fit everyone. And if you revere someone and you respect them, then you have to treat them according to how they desire to be treated. All right, Jim, I'm throwing it over to you. I ran my mouth for a good amount of time. I believe it's your turn.
I agree with what you said. I always follow the Dave Chappelle model, when keeping it real goes wrong and he shows you examples. For those type of situations, it's always good to take a step back before you try to keep it real. Some situations most of the situations is due to a lack of knowledge on the other person's part. It doesn't mean in an insultive way or in a way that you automatically interpret it as a defense mechanism. And unfortunately, most of us have that defense mechanism and we just interpret that it's meant that way. And we have to automatically on that spot correct the person, which is really not the most advantageous way to get your point across, I should say. So in that retrospect, with keeping it real and with the filter, it's very good to have a little bit of temperament and along with that, because what you may have feel at the moment may not be the best way to express it at that time. Keep your passions in check when you do something like that, because that you don't. I'm saying you have to understand where the other person's coming from, but you have to understand why the person will say that comment or something like that, and you get up on understanding how they came to that conclusion is usually the best way to do it. Then try to make a correction if necessary. It's, not everything has to be addressed at that one moment to try to keep it, keep that point across. In addition, what Jonathan said earlier, which I really realized, is that, we out of ceremony or extend a ceremony of asking people certain questions, but we don't retain that information, or we don't even listen to what they say.
Yes. Yes.
First part is, it's like, how was your day? And you break it down to them, and then they talk, and then the other person starts talking, and they talk about their day. And they mention something that you already said, but they're asking you again, like 5 minutes later. I'm like, huh? Like, didn't I just explain this to you? And this is what I mean by saying on ceremony, you ask the questions just to get out of the way. And that's what most conversations is about. Asking questions to get out of the way, to pretend that you're being cordial. No.
Yes.
I don't feel like repeating I said 5 minutes ago, repeating it again, like, I just said this to you, like, and it just feels like it's a time waster. I can't stand it. That's when the conversation really goes sour for me. When you don't actively pay attention to stuff like that, and you just blocked out what I said just for me to ask you that question so you can get something off your chest.
That is so true. That is so true.
I can't do it. I can't do it. That's
oh
what
God.
That's when keeping it real goes wrong for me.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I will definitely correct that as soon as it happens. Annoying.
Oh my God, that is so true. And and worse than that are people that you go to, and as soon as you express how you feel, they just go into something that they want to talk to you about. And I've had it happen to me so many times. Oh, this has happened to me today, and I'm stressed out. And then they'll be like, this happened to me today. I'm so stressed out. This has happened, that happened. And I'm like, what? Listen, if you want to talk to me about a problem you're having, call me about a problem you're having. But if you're talking to me if I'm calling you about a problem that you're having, then I need to talk about the problem that I'm having. And please, so it's funny that you say that. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then another thing is, with the whole when a person has a problem, like what you said, when a person has a problem with me, I always affirm what they're saying. So I'm saying, I listen to what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. I ask some questions on where they come to that idea and conclusions. I don't really try to reverse the victim role, saying, it's when they complain about you, it's not for you to say something that you did to them. That's like very petty. Like, oh, well, you did this. No, that's not addressing the problem. It's just being petty. Because if you had a problem with that person, you should be able to address it at that time too. You don't hold it as a get out of jail free card.
Right.
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
For me, it's like, okay, you have a problem with me, fine. We can come to it and address the problem that you have with me. It could be something very simple, that they may have the problem with. Maybe just a simple solution or a simple misunderstanding. It's just not to the point of saying that you have a problem with me, but I had a problem with you first, and this is why. No, that's not really communicating. That's just
right. Tit for tat. Right.
Yeah, people's face. That's not, and that's what most of the conversations I've seen.
It does.
It's not that. It's not that. If like, why would you have a problem with a person and just waited to use it until when somebody has a problem with you?
Yeah.
It's not poor. It's poor communication. But it's also being petty. It doesn't work like that. We have to understand that people will have problems with you, and it could be something large or small, but you can't discount why a person has a problem with you, because it may be a simple course correction or communication, ineffective breakdown in communication that they may have, and you just explain it clearly. You have to explain, you have to come to the realization, that someone does have a problem with you. And that's what people don't like when somebody has a problem with you. It's like, oh, well, you shouldn't have a problem with me at all because, I do this. it's not what you are saying, it's what you give off. And people may have a problem with that. And you have to accept it and you have to correct it. You know, your attitude doesn't fit everyone. Like what you say, your attitude doesn't fit everyone, Jonathan, but you have to customize and adapt to
That's
other
right.
you may come across with.
Right. Especially if you want to continue a healthy relationship with them.
Yes.
All right, Donnie, go ahead. Bring it up in the rear here. What you got?
I think one of the big takeaways from all the stuff we've been talking about, at least in terms of the keeping it real side of things, and this applies to many topics, but being justified isn't the same thing as being right. You see a lot of people who maybe they have a valid complaint. I definitely used to do this a lot. There would have been a bunch of arguments that would have went a lot better if I didn't. But when you feel like whatever you went through and whatever point you have to make is so valid that you need to make every single point to make sure that person knows they're wrong, that's one of the more self-destructive behaviors you can get.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't matter at that point who's right. What matters is how we're going to go forward and fix this issue.
Right.
I think some people get confused because we call these like discussions, fights, arguments, or whatever, that it has to be like a me versus you, and someone has to come out on top, and then we can move past it.
Right. Exactly.
But like when you do things like that, when you need somebody to come out on top before you can move past it, then all you're going to do is just move forward. And now there's resentment, and that person's just going to hold that going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. And chances are now, even if you were right in the first place, now you're going to get a reputation as being like this bully or whatever, because all you need to do is prove yourself right. And then now your relationship's broken at that point.
Yeah.
I just want to, I had to throw that in there because once again, that was something that I had to go to therapy to work on that one because it was just a subconscious thing. I wasn't doing it on purpose.
It's all subconscious. You don't even know. That's the thing. You don't even know you're doing these patterns.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's why I encourage everybody to, and it's not to minimize anyone, but I think everybody needs therapy. Everyone, every last person, because we came into this world broken. We're all broken because of our circumstances, and it all came from the person before us. No one came. See, the problem is there was no manual on how to be productive in life in the beginning. As you get older, then it's like kids, it's like children. I remember when I was a kid and I was like in kindergarten and first grade, they tell you, oh, there's no number less than 1, like 0 is 0 and then there's nothing. So all your life into that point where you grow, and then they tell you about negative numbers. You didn't know about negative numbers. You didn't know about -1, -2, -39. You didn't know about that. You're like, oh, there's only 0, 1, 2, and then you go on this way. And then when you mature, you tend to know more when someone teaches you more. You understand about and then in the beginning, you learn about, plus, minus, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. And then as you get older, you learn about fractions and binomials and all types of quadratic equations and things like that. But there's a point in your life where it happens. It's the same thing with who we are as people. We start off as not knowing anything. And it takes whoever's the one that's going to teach us how to be better to help us be better. But most of us are not suitable to do that for other people. So that's the problem. Most of us are not equipped with helping other people. If you don't know how to give CPR, how can you train someone else to give CPR if you don't know how to do it yourself? And that's really what it boils down to, is the people who've come before us to tell us to do better didn't know better themselves because they weren't trained. There's so many people in this world that are not trained to do those things. That's why so many of us, rich, poor, black, white, it doesn't matter where you come from, of all walks of life, struggle with this, struggle with personal relationships, struggle with communication. I mean, look at J-Lo and A-Rod. They can't get it together and they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's a problem we all, from all walks of life, experience. And so the point of having these discussions is to stop the bleeding, to stop the leaks, to plug the leaks, the holes in the cup so that you can fill a cup up. So I suggest everybody, from A to Z, every last name from A to Z. If you got a number in your name, that includes you too. But everybody should get some sort of therapy and figure it out. So, I just wanted to really go over that and just really encourage that. And pretty much, I want to kind of leave it on that note, because I felt like this was just so important discussion we had today, and let everybody close out with whatever they want to say goodbye to everyone with, and then end this topic for today. So Dawn, I'll leave it with you. And I see we lost Jim, but Donnie, I guess you'll take up the slack for Jim.
This was an amazing conversation. As soon as you told me that we're talking about communication, I was like, amazing, like something that I'm very passionate about. And I think it's important for all humans to know how to communicate properly. And therapy will help you in more ways than you think, even if you don't think you'll need it. Why not? Why not just check to see, how your childhood was, how you're doing now, just any qualms or worries about, your state and your health. So I think that's great that we promote that. And I think I've said a lot. So just listen, active listening, emotional control and nonverbal communication is important when trying to communicate.
Yes,
properly.
definitely. You gave a lot of food for the soul.
Oh yeah.
All right, Donnie, here you go. Anchor us out.
Sure. No, I'm not even going to comment on that technical pun you just said. One of my big things, I wanted to give one more just like quick piece of advice, because it's a pretty simple one.
You have great advice. Everything you say is gold. Everything.
Thank you. I spent a lot of years with people asking me for advice, so I had to practice. What I would say is don't shut out attempts at communication. I've seen a lot of people who were communicated to maybe in the wrong way, or a way they just couldn't respond to very well. But shutting that down will almost always guarantee you won't ever get a future attempt at communication. I think it's important that communication is built towards. So if someone communicates to you in a way that you're maybe not responding to, just let them know that, because if they were trying in the first place, chances are they're willing to try to adjust to what you need. I just wanted to leave that on that.
That's a pretty good one. And I just want to say also, please be patient and less judgmental, because a lot of times when things rub us the wrong way, we tend to judge people when they bring things to us that we don't like that they said. So please, if a person matters to you, be patient, even if the approach is painful. Be patient in what people say to you. Take what they're saying to you from a place of love, because if you care about them, there should always be love in the, not only of the things that are peaceful between you, but even the disagreements that you have with people. You have to have a place with love, just like the conversation I said with my friend, where we could curse each other out and be like, oh, where are you going for lunch right after? And, he called my phone and I picked right up like it was the president of the United States calling me, or my boss. So, you have to have patience, and you have to take things from love. If people matter to you, even if they don't matter, you should treat everybody like they matter. Even the least person, the homeless guy in the street, you should never look down upon anyone, because I'm pretty sure how it would feel for somebody to look down upon you. So with that pretty much being said and done, I just want to wish everyone a lovely week or weekend or whatever day of the week you're watching or listening, and wish you a fair life until the next time we meet again. You can wish everybody a goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.